Hi, Karina. Welcome to the World Vegan Travel Podcast.
Thanks so much for having me, Bridie. Great to be here.
I am so thrilled to have you joining us today because we're going to be talking about a part of the world that is in my province in Canada, but I've not been to for reasons that I think will probably become clear as we talk more about it. But that's not to say that there are not wonderful things about this part of the world. And we're talking about the Sunshine Coast, which I didn't even know about until I moved to British Columbia. So, before we get into all of that and you share your knowledge as a long term resident of this part of the world, can you tell us what it is that you do in the vegan space?
I like telling people that I kick people's asses for a living, which is true. But more usefully, I'm a fitness coach. So I run a fitness and nutrition coaching business with a team of 3 coaches, specifically for vegans. So all of our clients are not necessarily 100% vegan, but they are on the plant-based spectrum somewhere. So some folks are just going vegan and they're hiring us because they need help with that process. And then other folks are super long-term vegan. We have one client who is 66, who's been vegan for almost 50 years. And she does multiple pull-ups in a row, by the way, with perfect form. But there's a gradient of interest and experience with the plant-based diet, but everyone is on the same page that they want a coach who gets it, who is not going to push chicken breast and whey protein powder and all of those other things. And so we work with folks all over the world. Our clients live pretty much everywhere, and we get to work with them on strength training and nutrition.
So how did you get into that space? Were you vegan and then you got into fitness, or were you in fitness and you became vegan?
That's a good question. They both happened in the same year.
Oh, really?
So a long time ago, I was 16. It was 2003. And I had already been vegetarian for 5 years, but it took me 5 years to realize that the meat, dairy, and egg industries are interchangeable. They are not distinguishable from each other. So when I figured that out, I went vegan because initially the vegetarianism was from an ethical standpoint. And so I guess that technically came first. It then got me thinking about other things like the environment and health. I always say I'm not vegan for health reasons. I'm always an ethical vegan first. But there are other bonuses. We can have health benefits. We can have environmental benefits. And so the fitness piece came at the same time. I started strength training and learning how to do things properly. Way later, though, in 2011 is where I was finishing my graduate degree. I did my degree in gerontology, specializing in health and aging. And at that point, I decided I wanted to do something one-on-one with people rather than research. I'm still a complete nerd at heart and I write books and whatnot, but I wanted to do one-on-one work with people. And so I became a trainer. I did that whole certification exam process the same month that I defended my thesis, which is not recommended. But basically did a 180, started working with people, and was not a vegan business at that point. I was working with anyone who wanted to strength train in gym settings. I did that for 7 years. And in that process, especially when we went completely online in 2017, I became more and more focused on the veganism piece. I'd been vegan the whole time, of course, but starting to use that as our niche within fitness.
Was that scary to make that transition?
It was, because as a relatively new business, I think even a 5-year-old business is still relatively new in the scheme of things. It feels like you're shutting off a lot of potential customers. But really, if you're going to run a successful business, you need to have more people that you don't work with than you do people that you do work with. So we work with 0.001% of the population, right? Vegans who are into healthy aging, who have strength training goals, who might have physique goals, but they're not on the forefront. There's like certain aspects even within being vegan. So yeah, it was scary. But now I'm realizing, especially being an online business, veganism is not enough of a niche. You need to niche down even further. And so now it's just how we operate.
I couldn't agree with you more. That's exactly what we do as well. We obviously, our business is vegan travel and group vegan travel, which is niched down a little bit more, but we decided to niche down even more, which is like more sort of high end kind of things. So really our tours would only be affordable, or that people would choose to take our tours if they had a certain disposable income. So yeah,
exactly.
niching down
Yep.
can be good for sure. Okay, thank you so much for that. Can you please tell us how you ended up living in Powell River or the Sunshine Coast? Because it's quite a small place.
It is. So my husband and I moved here from Vancouver. We are born and raised Vancouverites, which is basically vegan Mecca. The options nowadays are insane. Vancouver is really all we knew until we decided, you know what? This big city thing might not be our thing anymore. The construction, the noise. I really wanted to have a larger property with an outbuilding and a music studio. You're looking at a $6 million property in Vancouver for that amount of space, right? So we started looking into options where we could buy property that isn't ridiculous, but a place that still had a good cultural scene. We're both musicians, so the music scene was super important. And Powell River kept popping up. It's got an international choral festival. It's world renowned. It's got a jazz fest. It has a massive music academy that 10% of the population goes to. It's insane. And there's only 13,000 people here, right? So we heard about this, and we actually bought our house sight unseen before we had ever visited Powell River. So it was a little crazy.
Oh my goodness, that sounds very anxiety-inducing from my perspective.
I know. We'd never done anything like that before. But of course, we got the place inspected and we could see photos and we had a really great realtor and all the things. But the first time we saw our house in person, we already owned it. So it was an adventure. But now I have a gym. My husband has a music studio. The room that I'm recording the podcast in right now is even a separate room that's sound treated. It happened that a musician lived here before we moved in. And it's this perfectly sound treated little booth with all the right racks for cables and everything. So yeah, it's perfect.
That's amazing. And when did you move?
We moved to Powell River in 2018. So it hasn't been that long.
Oh, I don't know, 6 years.
Yeah, it's enough.
A decent amount of time, according to me anyway.
Yes.
Okay, all right. So can you explain, Karina, to our listeners exactly where Powell River and the Sunshine Coast is? Because most of our listeners are in the United States, and I feel like things get a little bit confusing when we look at Vancouver Island and that mainland part. There really isn't much there on the mainland part of the Sunshine Coast and further north. Can you explain all of that, please?
Totally. I didn't know this either, even living in BC my entire life. Don't feel bad if you're listening and you're like, what the heck is Powell River and where's the Sunshine Coast? For people who have heard of the Sunshine Coast, usually what they think of is the Gibsons area. What you do is you drive to Horseshoe Bay, which is in the lower mainland. It's in Vancouver, technically.
It's actually just about 20 minutes drive south of where I live in Squamish.
That's right.
So it's between Vancouver and Squamish. Continue.
Yep. And my sister lives in Squamish. So if we were to go visit her, we would go through Horseshoe Bay. So you take a ferry from Horseshoe Bay to a northern part of the coast. It's confusing because you're taking a ferry. A lot of people immediately think it's an island. No, it's just because there are so many fjords cutting into the mainland that instead of creating a really long road all the way around them, it's faster just to take a boat. You take a ferry across a fjord, you're still on the mainland, but you're now slightly north of Vancouver. Now, that's Gibsons, that's the Sunshine Coast, there's seashell there, tiny little places, it's beautiful. But you're not at Powell River yet. If you want to get to Powell River, you need to drive an hour up that coast and then take another ferry across another fjord for about 50 minutes or so.
50?
Yes, yep.
Oh.
And then drive half an hour. It's quite a trek. And you're still on the mainland. So a lot of people who don't know, they ask us like, hey, how's island life? And I'm like, it's not an island. Technically, we are the northern Sunshine Coast. We're not northern BC, but we're the northern part of the BC's Sunshine Coast. and we're directly east of Vancouver Island. So Vancouver Island is where Tofino is. It's where Victoria is. A lot of folks have heard of those big cities, big city like tourist places. And so we are a 90-minute ferry ride directly east of Vancouver Island. It's directly west to us.
So you can get there really two different ways.
Yes. So if you wanted to, you could go through Victoria. If folks are coming from Vancouver or from the States further south, they could go through Victoria, drive up Vancouver Island, and then take a ferry over from Comox or Courtney.
Something that I think might make sense to people as well is that a lot of the cruise ships that go up to Alaska, they go through the Inside Passage. Correct me if I'm wrong.
That's correct.
And that's between the mainland and Vancouver Island.
It depends. It's usually the smaller ones. The bigger ones are further away from us and closer to Vancouver Island. But if there are smaller ones, I've seen a couple of eco cruise ships that are usually smaller scale. They often go between us and Texada Island, which is actually pretty close to us. So Texada Island is between us and Vancouver Island. It's 50 kilometers long, but there's only 1,000 people who live there. It's quite a cool place. So if there's any boat traffic that goes between us and Texada, we'll see it for sure.
Great. So it's quite hard to get to, which I think probably puts a lot of people off making the effort to go there maybe, but that doesn't mean that there are not incredible places to see and cultural experiences to have, etc. Can you share with us why people would want to make the huge effort to go to Powell River or the Sunshine Coast in the first place?
Yes, that's a great question. And by the way, there is a plane that takes only 25 minutes. And there's two options. So you can take a float plane directly from downtown Vancouver, like the harbor, and be like literally at my doorstep in half an hour. It lands on the lake that's 3 minutes from my house. It's awesome. And then there's a regular plane that goes from the airport in Richmond in the Lower Mainland, and it just lands at the Powell River Airport, which is 10 minutes away from everything. So that is another option, just putting it out there. You don't have to take 6 hours and do the whole thing from either Squamish or Vancouver to Powell River.
And what do you normally do when you go to Vancouver?
It depends if I need a vehicle. If I don't need a vehicle, plane 100%. My husband actually just got back from a weekend in Vancouver and he took the plane. He's visiting family. He's got people driving him around. But if you're going and you have gear or you have a gig and your car is full of accordions, for example, in my case, then you have to drive.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Things to do. Okay. If you're an outdoorsy person, this is your place. So we're talking rock climbing, hiking, mountain biking, world-class mountain biking especially. The rock climbing is a bit further out, so you'd have to drive a couple hours. It's not right in Powell River. But mountain biking, I'm an open water swimmer. I actually run an open water swim club with a friend. So during the swim season, which just ended, the swim season is all year if you're in the pool, but the open water swim season just ended. We are swimming in beautiful lakes. There's 30 or more lakes within about half an hour of my house. It's pretty insane.
Wow.
So stand-up paddling, any sort of water sports, and any sort of outdoor stuff. Right now is mushrooming season. Everyone is out there gathering chanterelles and lobster mushrooms and all the things. So that's for sure something. And then if you're into more cultural experiences, things that are indoors, the music scene is huge here. And it's very outsized for how relatively few people live here.
Interesting.
So I don't really know how that ended up happening, but the Powell River Academy of Music runs a lot of events. One of those events is the annual Accordion Fest that I lead, by the way.
Oh, wow. You play the accordion?
I do. Yes, it's my main instrument.
Amazing.
Yeah. So the Accordion Fest, we're planning our 4th year right now. And our headliner is actually coming from Melbourne, Australia, just for this fest in Powell River. It's amazing. There's people who are coming from all over. The Choral Festival I mentioned earlier happens every 2 years. And we're looking at hundreds and hundreds of choral singers who are coming from around the world, Africa, Europe, everywhere. And then they have, it's basically like a competition with lots of concerts and master classes and whatnot. There's classical music here, Prisma, which is not run through the academy. It's its own music group with world-class people. Same deal with the jazz festival. There's like New York jazz musicians coming here to play Powell River for whatever reason. So lots of that, live shows, music gigs, workshops. I feel like there's interest in a lot of things. And so if you're someone who has a niche interest and organizational skills, if you start something, people will come.
There's sounding like there's quite a lot of crossover between Squamish actually
Yes.
and Powell River. I
Yep.
don't think we have a big music scene here, but the mountain biking, yes, check it. Lakes, yes. Hiking, yes. Outdoors, yes.
Yep.
But I'm guessing that it's just not as busy as
No.
Squamish is.
There's a huge influx of people moving here from Squamish. They're called the Squamigrants.
No way.
And so one of my friends from Squamish actually is making a concerted effort to make friends with people here who aren't from Squamish, and it's really hard. Everyone's from
Really?
Squamish.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
I can totally see why that's the case.
Right?
Squamish has become very expensive and busier than it used to be. It's certainly a changing city, but yeah, that's so interesting. Now, what about accommodations in Powell River? Is it much cheaper than Squamish would be? Are there a lot of options?
Yeah, it's probably similar. In the high season, it's probably a little bit less than Squamish. I remember looking at hotel rooms around Christmas in Squamish, and I was like, good Lord, the prices are insane. So it's not quite that level or Vancouver level, but it depends on the season, depends what's going on. There's a logger sports event that happens here every year. There's a huge mountain biking event. So if there's something happening and all the rooms are booked, they just jack up the prices because they can, like any other place. But there's also Airbnbs, like anywhere else, that are usually a little more reasonable for the space that you get. And then there's some really cool places. There's a place called Boxwood Cottages, which is this amazing grounds, just really well-kept garden with a rose garden, and it's just a beautiful spot. People get married there. So they have little cottages you can stay in. There's some yurts you can rent if that's your thing. So it depends what type of a experience people want. But there's options.
During the school holidays, do you get a lot of just families coming to Powell River to just spend time there and maybe camp in the provincial parks that are around there?
For sure. Yes. And I think a lot of times it's actually people who live here who don't really feel like they need to go anywhere because it's so amazing here.
Right.
So they just make use of the campsites that we have. And there's tons. There's the Willingdon Beach campsite, which is city run, I believe, right on the ocean.
Wow.
And then there's also provincial parks like Inland Lake Provincial Park, areas that are well kept. And certain times of the year, it's free to camp there. So right now, we're recording this in October. It is raining. It is cold. The campsites are full. There's no empty spots. People are out there doing their mushroom picking, hanging out by the lake, going for hikes in the rain. It's just a thing.
How is it like in the wintertime in this part of the world? I think many people would know that Vancouver, it doesn't get that cold, albeit it does get rainy. But what about Powell River?
Well, I feel like it's between Squamish and Vancouver. So it's really geographically not that far away from Vancouver. It just takes a long time to get to because of the ferries, right? So you're really not covering that much distance. It's not that much further north than Vancouver is. Squamish is a higher elevation, so it gets more snow than we do. But it's very similar to Vancouver, very mild, with one main difference, and that is that the weather changes way more often than the Lower Mainland. In Vancouver, if you look at your weather app and it says rain in the forecast today, you're going to get rain in the forecast. You're going to get rain all day. It's not going to change. But here, if it says rain in the forecast, you'll get rain for maybe 40 minutes. And then the sun comes out. Then it rains some more. Then there's a rainbow. It just can't make up its mind. So I feel like we get more pockets. Sunshine Coast is not just a marketing term. It's actually true.
And do you get a lot of tourists visiting in the wintertime? Does the place completely die from a tourist perspective? There's a special event going on.
Yeah, unless there's a special event, there's not a ton of tourists here in the winter. A lot of folks will go snowshoeing or cross-country skiing, that kind of stuff. But it's people who are looking to do that will probably go to Squamish, honestly. Yeah, it is pretty quiet here comparatively.
I guess that's not as nice as a year-round resident. You get a bit of a break from the tourists.
Exactly.
That's really lovely. So is this part of the world very vegan friendly?
If I had to answer in one word, I'd say no. But the more expanded version of that is it depends what you're comparing it to. If you're comparing it to the deep south of the States, oh yeah, it's very vegan friendly.
Right.
You know, on a very broad stereotyped level, obviously. If you're comparing it to Vancouver, not vegan friendly at all. We don't have any vegan restaurants here that are 100% plant-based, whereas Vancouver has, I don't know how many, 40? Who knows? It's a lot. But that's just a population numbers game. We actually have a very decent population of vegans here as a percentage of the people who live here. It's just not enough to sustain a business, right? Yeah, of course, there are vegan options at the restaurants here. Are they amazing? Not really. No. My friend runs a mostly vegan grocery store. It's 90% plant-based products in the town site mall here. And it's amazing. Produce, lots of vegan specialty items. So if there's something that you do want, he even orders things in if there's things that you want.
Nice.
So that's cool. But from a restaurant perspective, not particularly. But there are ways to get around that, like with farmers markets and stuff.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think anyone would go to Powell River, vegan or not, because of the culinary scene.
You are not wrong. Look, I don't know anything about seafood because I haven't had any sort of seafood or meat in 26 years, something like that. So I couldn't tell you about that. I'm sure the seafood is good if that's your thing, but obviously it's not for us.
Right.
And even then, from my friends who aren't in the plant-based world, it's not really that exciting, honestly.
No,
not really.
No.
No.
You're not going to starve, that's for sure. You're going to be able to stay healthy and sustained. But to have a 3-star Michelin guide meal, that's not why you go to Powell River.
Definitely not.
So something I'm curious about, because you're on the northern end of the Sunshine Coast, what is it like to go further north and explore a little bit further afield? Like, I'm imagining if I was going to take a road trip, I might like to do the lower Sunshine Coast and then go to Powell River. And what can I do after that?
Yeah, good question. Okay, so if you're in a vehicle, there is only a half hour of highway left after Powell River. Okay. Then you're at the end of the highway. That's as far as it goes.
That's amazing.
Yeah, so that's Lund. It's an amazing place. Lots of artists living there. It's a really cool place. That's a jumping off point if you were then to take a boat somewhere. So that's where you can get into the really cool areas further north that you can't get to by vehicle. Powell River, then you drive half an hour to Lund, further north. And then if you want to, you can take boat tours in that whole area of islands, the passages there. It's pretty amazing. I've done that once, just like a day tour on a boat. Just the wildlife, and there's no civilization up there. If you're really adventurous, there's actually a First Nations run lodge, the Clahus, and it's boat accessible only. So you have to get a charter or you need your own boat. And then it's just this amazing, this is like on my bucket list, right? I haven't gone there yet, but you can do bear watching and you could do helicopter tours. It's pretty amazing.
I think I've heard of that place. I saw a YouTube video about it. Downey Live. He specializes in travel opportunities. He's Vancouver based during the pandemic. He just did stuff in British Columbia, and I can't remember the name, but it was definitely Indigenous owned and operated. Absolutely beautiful, large sort of lodge right on the edge of the water.
Yeah.
Do you think we're talking about the same thing?
It's possible. It's possible. It's very far north.
Like up in Haida Gwaii?
Not quite Haida Gwaii, I don't think.
Okay.
Yeah, I can't remember exactly what it's called. There is Savory Island, which is something else. So Savory Island is a 10-minute boat taxi, water taxi from Lund. So again, you go to Powell River, you drive half an hour to Lund, and then it's a 10-minute water taxi directly west of Lund. And Savory Island, I don't know how many people live there year round, but it has white sand beaches. It looks like Hawaii, and it's in BC. It's amazing. Wow. There's no cars there unless you're a resident, and then you're allowed to barge in your car and have it there. Otherwise, if you're just visiting, it's just like a foot passenger water taxi. So that's an option from Lund too, very popular.
So, are there any ferries from Lund to other places, or do you have to take these boat taxis that you're referring to, or hire your own boat?
From Lund, it's just water taxis. So there's a couple options where you can go
Oh,
to Cortez Island. There's probably other ones that I don't know about. There's actually a group of homeschool kids on Cortez Island that take the water taxi to Lund and then take a bus to the Powell River Academy of Music. I think it's like once a month or something. So we have connections with other communities that are boat access only. And then we're the hub where they come and enjoy live music and do sessions at the music academy and stuff. So it's pretty cool.
it really does sound like such a unique place to live. Do you think you're going to be there for a long time? Are you quite happy there?
I think so. I don't really know where else
Yeah.
I would go. From a logistical perspective, we bought a house and paid it off in 5 years. And I have my own gym. I have a huge music scene here that I'm plugged into with the accordion thing, and
Mm.
then also a band that I play in. So yeah, I think this is pretty much it for us.
That's amazing. I know that there is a lot of Indigenous First Nations around that part of the Sunshine Coast and all through up Haida Gwaii and places like that. And something I'm curious about is, are there any opportunities for travelers to interact? Obviously, there's that lodge that you mentioned, which I think would be an amazing place to stay and support and experience. Are there any other things?
That's a great question. The area here is the traditional lands of the Coast Salish people. And specifically in our area, which by the way is called the Cathet region. So the whole region from Lund to south of town where the ferry is called the Cathet region with a small Qathet. So that's a First Nations word. So within that area, it's the Tla'amin First Nations group. And by the way, as a side note, they have requested that the town consider changing its name because Powell is a
Ooh.
reference to Israel Powell, who was the Minister of Indian Affairs back in the day, who was
Ah.
directly involved in residential schools.
Mm.
As you can see, this is a huge problem.
Yeah, that's not a
Generational.
nice reminder to have
Yeah,
every time you drive into town at all.
exactly. So there have been a lot of changes. A lot of our hospital has changed its name. It's the Catholic General Hospital now. A lot of people are doing
Mm.
this very small act, but an important one of reconciliation. As for opportunities, I'm not entirely sure if there's a lodge you can go to here. I don't think so. But
Mm.
there are often opportunities to have conversations. It depends what events are happening. So just recently, last week, based on when we're recording this, was the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation. And so there's lots of events around that where the Tla'amin are leading workshops and they're doing a walk and they're doing a flag raising. And
Mm.
we as settler folks can learn about the history. So there's things like that. I was just at an event at 32 Lakes Cafe, which has amazing non-dairy options, by the way, where they were talking about food security and food insecurity.
Oh,
And one of the panelists there was from Tla'amin Nation and was talking specifically about food security, what he's doing on his board to help people who live in the nation. And so we were all learning about these different programs and asking questions. And I feel like there's a lot of those kind of events versus a lodge that's run by Indigenous folks. And then you can go
mm.
experience that. I think here it's more about workshops and speakers and connecting that way.
Oh, that's great. Fantastic. I am sure everyone listening to this is convinced to put Powell River or Katet region on their bucket list. I know I definitely want to. Okay, do you have any travel hacks for staying vegan when you're traveling?
When I travel, 80% of my luggage is food. Honestly,
Oh,
the main hack is packing a lot of food. Now, this comes from someone who has a lot of food allergies. I'm vegan, but I also
ah,
carry an EpiPen on my person at all times.
oh my good.
Travel for me is a little bit harder than if I were just vegan, hence
Yeah,
packing a lot of food. So that is always step number one.
yeah.
Step number two is forethought. So you
Mm,
can't just go to a place that you don't know and assume you're going to have a decent meal. You need to
yeah.
research. use the apps if you need to, call people on the phone, creep on websites. It's worth it.
Fantastic. And what is something apart from the food that you always pack that maybe not everyone else packs?
Ooh, that would be my jump rope. 100%. Got to be able to do my jump
Ah.
rope.
Is that something you just do when you're traveling?
No,
Or all
I
the
love doing
time?
it all the time. And one time I forgot to pack it, but I was in Tofino on Vancouver Island and I used a piece of kelp instead. It actually worked pretty well.
Are you serious? Oh, that's brilliant.
Yeah.
I'm not surprised. It's pretty robust
Right?
stuff,
I know.
kelp. And what is your most memorable vegan meal you've had while traveling?
Okay, memorable doesn't mean excellent.
Actively. Let's
Because I could tell you which one was the most memorable from a bad perspective, which was a plate of bok choy with nothing else.
Oh no, that's really disappointing.
I know, but you know what? That's a good question. Oh, okay. So it was actually an item. It wasn't a meal. It was in Australia. The non-dairy yogurt that I found that unfortunately does not export outside of Australia. And I can't even remember what brand it was. But we actually had to pack a whole bunch of food for a week in Kakadu National Park. So no other humans. We're staying in little wilderness lodges. So we do have fridges at night, but we had to pack all of our own food. And this freaking yogurt, I still remember this from 2017. It had the good tangy flavor. It tasted like what I remember of dairy yogurt. And then, of course, I looked at it afterwards and it's only in Australia.
Oh, goodness. That's incredible. And what are your upcoming travel plans? Do you have anything on the horizon?
Not at the moment. I think going back and forth to Vancouver is mostly what we're doing. My husband's dad is going through some health challenges, and so we've mostly been going back and forth from here to Vancouver. That's why Murray was just in Vancouver for the weekend. So nothing really on the horizon. I feel like living here, I don't get cabin fever like I used to. I don't have this feeling of, oh, I have to go somewhere else. I just go and do a different hike, or it's going to take 20 years to do all the trails around here. So not at the moment.
Okay, that's a great answer. And what is a travel experience that's very high on your bucket list?
Ooh, Easter Island for some reason. I've always wanted to go to Easter Island. I know it's really hard to get to, but it sounds and looks real intriguing.
Yeah, it really does. Yeah, for sure. All right. Karina, I want to thank you so much for being on the Well Vegan Travel podcast. Would you please let our listeners know where they might find you, your Instagram handles, the name of your podcast, so that they might look you up?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. Always great to chat. And listeners, also, if they haven't listened to your episode on my podcast, they should do that. So it's the No BS Vegan podcast, myth busting, evidence-based advice, mostly around fitness and health and nutrition, but not always, and always with a vegan bent. And then everything else is under Karina Inkster. So Karina Inkster is my handle on Instagram, facebook.com/Karina Inkster, KarinaInkster.com, the hub of all vegan strength training nerdery. So yeah, that's pretty much it.
I love it. Karina, thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Bridie.